Welcome to Anchored by the Word, the podcast ministry of Westlake Baptist Church in Moneta, Virginia. With your host, Pastor Justin Lyons.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Anchored by the Word. I'm your host, Justin Likens, and joining me after a week's absence is my wonderful wife, Diana. Welcome back.
Thank you. They say absence makes the heart grow fonder. Do you love me more today than you did 2 weeks ago?
Absolutely. And it also makes the podcast shorter. Do with that what you will. But we're just a few days away from two of our boys graduating. Where has the time gone?
I don't know. It's crazy.
I know you've kind of been up in your feels some the last week going through memories and seeing baby clothes and all of that. Honestly, it hasn't hit me yet, but I know it's going to. The older I get, the softer I get. And I'm not just talking about my midsection. But, there's been a lot going on the past few weeks. So it's really been just trying to focus a day at a time, a week at a time. But now I can't dodge it. Graduation is here.
Yes, it is.
So I know you're an avid reader, and I want to ask you a question. Have you ever read a book that made you think hard about something or maybe caused you to reevaluate some things in your life?
I am an avid reader, but most of the things that I read are pretty soft and lighthearted fiction, what you would call Christian smut. But even in those kinds of books, yes, I do find things that really make me take stock of, is this how I want to live, or are there changes that I need to make? But of course, the thing that I read the most that brings those questions up has to be the Bible.
Sure. Now, just for our audience to understand why I call it Christian smut, it's really just to get under your skin and have a little bit of fun with you. It's not that you're reading anything inappropriately,
Well,
unless the Amish is inappropriate.
in the words of Dr. Phil, how's that working out for you?
Not very well.
Don't bother me a bit. I'll just keep reading.
That's right. So, for me, there's been a few books. One of them was the book titled The Forgotten Jesus by Robbie Gallaty. That book really kind of helped spark an interest for me in learning more about the Jewish culture that Jesus grew up in. I understand that culture. It really kind of unlocked a few stories for me in ways that I'd never really understood or thought about. So that was one. Another is The Insanity of God by Nick Ripken. In that book, he talks about a Christian who lives over in Russia that had been imprisoned before the Iron Curtain fell, and how the Russian Christians' prayer was very different than the way many American Christians pray. So that was really, really eye-opening. But a book I just started working through last week is hitting a little bit different than I anticipated it. The book is titled Worship Matters. It's by Bob Kauflin, who is the founder of Sovereign Grace Music Ministries. It's a worship ministry that we dearly love here at Westlake. But so far, it's not that Kauflin is actually writing anything all that profound.
I'm sure he really appreciates that plug.
Yeah, probably. I think it's more the way he writes has just kind of struck me and caused me to question some things really about the way I pastor and am trying to lead the church. So I'm both excited and terrified to keep working through this book. And I hope to take our worship team through it as well over the course of the summer, just to remind ourselves of what is worship about, specifically the worship service. Because one of the things that he wrote in the book is this quote, "Worship is about what you love," end quote. That line reminds us that worship is more than a song that we sing in service. Worship is what we long for, who we adore, and ultimately who we believe is worthy of our wholehearted devotion. So I would define it as worship is a lifestyle, that every day we are worshiping someone, and it's either ourselves, others, or God.
That's what really hit me between the eyes when I was reading through the notes for this podcast, is just how true that is. Every day we are worshiping someone.
Hmm.
And Unfortunately, I feel like if we're honest, 90% of the time that someone we're worshiping is ourself. Because as humans, we are so inward focused. We think that other people think about us a whole lot than they really do.
Absolutely. We worship ourselves by making life about us. You know, focus on what makes us happy or determining what we believe is true. That's probably the largest idol in our society. But we also worship others by elevating their opinion of us above God's opinion of us. This is really what a people pleaser is. They want to make sure to keep people happy with them. And so they're often more like a chameleon. They will change based on who is there. And of course, we see Peter do that, and Paul rebukes him when he goes there because Peter was acting one way when he was with the Jewish people, but then when he was hanging around the Gentiles, he was acting a different way. And Paul goes, "Knock that stuff off."
Well, honey, I really think that you need to stop this passive aggressive podcast that you're doing right now. I get you're upset. I didn't come on last week, but you didn't need to pick on me being a people pleaser. I think we can move on to a new topic. We get it. You're upset.
Lay
Let's
out on me
move.
again.
Yeah, let's move past it. Okay.
We have to understand this, though. We were made by God and for God, Colossians 1 tells us. No one can satisfy us or give our life meaning like he does. Uh, Augustine puts it this way, quote, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they find rest in you," end quote. I've always loved that particular quote, but it's also challenging because I know there have been plenty of times in my life where I've been restless, and it's because I've been searching for meaning and purpose in someone other than God or what God has called me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a good reminder, but we need to understand that there's a battle that rages on inside of each of us daily. And that battle is, who am I going to surrender myself to today? The Christian life is really about surrender, but it's not a one and done. It's a daily thing that we need to do if we're going to live for God. It's why Jesus says in Luke 9, if you any man desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me.
And as much as you're right about it being a daily thing, I think it's even more than that, especially if you're going through a difficult time. A lot of times that surrender is moment by moment because we say, God, I'm going to leave this at the cross. I'm going to leave this with you. But our minds pick it right back up. And sometimes you can get a lot of good prayer time in by just every time that your mind goes back to whatever that thing is. God, I picked it back up again. Help me to lay it back down.
Mm.
Help me to focus on you instead of me, instead of my feelings, my circumstances, my whatever. Put my mind back where it belongs on you.
Yeah, Philippians 4 is where Paul writes, don't be anxious for anything, but in everything, in prayer, right? And it's a reminder that every time I start feeling anxiety rise up in me or restlessness rising, it's really an invitation from God for me to lay it down, to resurrender myself to Him, and ultimately to worship Him, to remind myself that there is a sovereign God and I am not Him,
Mm,
that I can trust Him not only with the events of the world, but I can trust Him with our family, with our marriage, with my life, with the church, literally everything.
right.
And so we need to learn to see those as prayer prompts rather than giving into the hope and the hopelessness and the despair that Satan likes to toss at us. Coughlin ended that chapter by asking what I felt were some really deep questions. And the purpose of the questions was to help us learn who we truly love the most? Because it's easy for us to go, oh, well, I love God the most, or I love my spouse or my family or whatever. But what's the evidence of it? Some of the questions that he wrote, and these aren't all of them, but some of them were, what do I enjoy the most? Where does my mind drift to when I don't have anything to do? What do I get angry about when I don't get it? Man, that was a hard one, right? I think about what are the things that kind of quote unquote trigger me? What causes me to feel depressed? What can bring me down? And then the last one was, what do I fear losing the most? Like I said, man, those are some hard questions, but I think it's important that we take time to wrestle with them and be honest about it because it's going to be God revealing where our heart is. Because the most unloving thing God could do is let us believe the lies that we tell ourselves that we love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and everything is great, and I don't have issues. That would be unloving because we're fallen sinners by nature. We're gonna struggle with things. And so we need God to lovingly confront us when we are straying.
Well, and one thing that my Sunday school class has been going through with the book of Esther just in the past 2 weeks is Haman having an overinflated view of himself. He goes before the king with the intent purpose of having Mordecai killed. But before he can make his appeal to the king goes, "What should I do for someone who I want to honor?" And the question that comes into Haman's mind is, who could the king possibly want to honor more than me?
Mhm.
And it sounds absurd when you read it there in black and white. But if we're honest, how often do we have that same mindset? Who could possibly deserve this more than I do?
Mhm.
Who could possibly be as what fill in the blank, whatever, as me? But we are so selfish.
There's a ditch on both sides, right? Just thinking back to, and I keep coming back to that because Josh always said it. Now it's ingrained in my mind. Thanks for that, Josh. But the one ditch is an overinflated view of ourself.
Mhm.
The other ditch, though, is I don't want to say underinflated, but a different view of ourselves of, well, I'm terrible and I'm trash and I'm this, and, all of these things as though, you know, God somehow made a mistake or something along those lines. And you're over there laughing when I said that I'm trash because you're probably thinking of Forky and Toy Story.
I am. You guys don't understand. Our son Noah is autistic and he is one of our graduates. And he has loved the movie Toy Story from the time he first watched it. And so we did Toy Story senior pictures, and now we are throwing a Toy Story themed graduation party. So my mind is full on Toy Story. And you are exactly right. That is exactly when you said I am trash, I was like, it's Forky. But it is applicable because when we say those things about ourselves, we're saying that God made a mistake, that God didn't do a good enough job making us. And that is just as detrimental as thinking way too highly of ourselves.
100%. Here's the thing, one of the most dangerous prayers that a Christian can pray is actually written by David in the Psalms when he says, "Search me, O God, and reveal to me who I am." It's dangerous and it's scary because what if God reveals something I don't like or something that I'm trying to downplay or, rationalize?
And you're right, it is scary, but that verse doesn't stop there. It's search me and know me, reveal any wicked way that is in me, and lead me in your way everlasting. That's
And
where the hope comes in.
it is, but I'm also gonna say, as somebody that is more of an introvert, praying that prayer, was part of leading me into ministry, which ministry then leads me to be up in front of crowds and things of that nature, so I'm still gonna rest on that as one of the scariest prayers to pray, but it is also one of the most freeing because you are letting go of the control that you want, and rather you're asking God to do what only He can do.
And you're right, it is terrifying. But this is where you are such a conundrum because you, in so many ways, are a thrill seeker.
True statement.
You wanna be on that roller coaster, and you don't mind when your butt lifts off the seat. For me, I'm scared of the roller coaster, and my butt leaving the seat is never a good thing. I'm hanging on for dear life. I wanna feel grounded. So for you to say that that's terrifying, y you say you wanna jump out of a plane and you wanna pull that ripcord and feel that moment when the air comes up underneath and you're slowly gliding down to earth. For you, I wouldn't think that'd be a scary prayer at all. Just let go and let God.
Oh, no, 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 let's not bring in that theology there, but listen, you're exactly right. I am one of the happiest times for me serving as a chaplain is when we're doing 110 with our hair on fire. The guys are like, "Chap, you good?" I'm like, "Is this as fast as you can go?"
That's you, and then there's me when you were driving me over Adney Gap, and I was like, "Can you just stop and let me walk?" I'll just walk. It's okay. And the worst part is we're talking about selfishness in the heart here. When I wanted you to let me out, I didn't ask you to let the kids out. We were in the minivan going over Adney Gap. I was like, I'll walk. I'll watch you and the kids go over Adney Gap in the minivan. So there's some selfishness right there.
Oh, for our audience that has no clue what we're talking about, and then obviously most of you don't. We followed GPS from our house over to a Christmas tree farm that we go with Diana's parents every year. I don't know, probably last 8 or 9 years or so. And normally we leave from Roanoke, and it takes us up the Blue Ridge Parkway. But leaving from Franklin County is like, hey, I know a shortcut. And this particular road basically feels like it's a lane and a half wide, maybe. There's
That's
no
generous.
there's no guardrails. It is literally a ditch on one side and about a 600-foot cliff on the other, and you just pray that you do not pass anybody on that. So, yeah, that was good times. But
No,
here's
it
my
wasn't.
question, but did you die?
The fear that I was going to was enough to still keep me up at nights. So you can take your police car with your wee woo, and I will be walking behind.
But here's the thing, it's in that fear that you feel alive.
Only because you know you're getting ready to die.
Okay, well, fair story. Yeah, I trying to jump back on topic here. I think about what Solomon wrote in Proverbs 4:23. He says, "Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it are flow the springs of life." What's interesting to note there is that in some instances in the Bible, the word heart and mind can actually be used interchangeably. They refer to our emotions, our desires, and our will. Our heart is describing the totality of a person when we talk about it from a biblical standpoint. It asks the question, who am I? Who is in control of me? And I have to guard who I am because it reveals who I love and trust. It reveals who am I worshiping today. And we talked about sitting in the passenger seat of a police cruiser. And those guys are always so protective of me. They want to make sure that nothing happens to me. And I'm greatly appreciative of that, by the way. But I always tell them the same thing. Guys, I made peace 4.5 years ago when I talked with the family and, we began to understand what this all was going to mean. I understand that I may get in this car and I may not go home. But at the same time, when it's my time, it's my time. And so it's just that level of comfort and peace that I have in that moment. And it probably sounds really crazy, but I enjoy it. I love those men and women. I love being able to be there with them and for them. And I can do it because I trust God that nothing's going to happen to me that He didn't already know about and have a plan for, even if that means that I go into His presence. But here's the insidious thing about our heart. It seldom drifts due to one big event. Rather, it's hundreds, if not thousands, of small compromises that lead to significant shifts. It makes me think about my family used to always go down to the Outer Banks. And there was a time in which they had to move the lighthouse. And it's because through all the years that the waves kept hitting and hitting and hitting, and it was causing erosion. Now the lighthouse was about to fall off into the Atlantic Ocean, so they had to move it. And that's what our heart does to us, right? Is we don't think about these things. They're just little compromises, but they lead to these significant shifts. And so moment by moment, day by day, I have to keep watch over my emotions and my desires. I have to guard them so that my will can be surrendered to the will of God instead of being focused on doing what I want to do.
Right.
And so I think there's probably some questions that we should ask ourselves each day. What's the state of my heart? Who am I worshiping with my life? Not just on Sundays at church, but every other day of the week. When I'm with people or when I'm by myself, where is my heart? What is my time investment and my spending reveal about who I love and what's the most important to me? I think that's a big one.
Especially the time investment for me, because it's kind of like what we talked about yesterday. How often can we say, "Oh man, I just ran out of time and I didn't have time to study my Bible." But then it pops up, "Oh, I spent 2 hours scrolling on social media."
Yep.
Did I not have time, or did I not have the right priorities?
Yep. And it happens. But yeah, listen, these are hard questions, but I think they're necessary questions for us to ask ourselves if we want to truly love God and worship Him the way that we should.
Right.
So, I think this is probably a good place for us to stop for the week. Is there anything you want to add?
I think I've gotten you off course really good up until this point, so I think I need to just stick to the script for the rest of the pod.
Nah, there is no script. We threw the script out the window. It's why it's so much fun. But as always, we want to say thank you to our audience for listening. We hope this episode is going to be helpful and challenging for us. If you could help us out, we would love for you to share this episode wherever you're listening, because our goal is to be faithful to the Bible and get the teachings of Scripture out as far as God is going to allow us to. Also want to say this, if you have an idea for an upcoming episode or series, there is still time to submit it. We love hearing from you, so slide over to Facebook or Instagram. You can even email us at anchoredbytheword@gmail.com. We promise we're not going to embarrass you. We're not going to mention your name on air or anything like that. But we want to know what's on your mind and heart and how we can bring the teachings of Scripture to help in your life, because I guarantee you this, if you have a question, somebody else has that same question. So we want to be able to do that. But until next week, may we all dive deeper into the Bible so that we can know God deeper in order to make Him known broader. And we'll look forward to seeing you here next week on Anchored by the Word.
This has been Anchored by the Word. Copyright 2025 to Westlake Baptist Church, 2075 Scruggs Road, Moneta, Virginia.